Hi, this is Jonathan Rosenhead, Jerusalem psychotherapist. This week's Torah and Psychology post with Parsha Tazria is titled, I Just Can't Stop Myself. In this week's Parsha, we read about saras, which is a spiritual illness that would manifest as a physical sign on a person's body. And we're told that this would result out of speaking Lashon Hara, of slandering and gossiping. And unfortunately, Lashon Hara is something that many people often struggle with. That there's something appealing and enjoyable about gossiping. And it can get to the point where even if a person has a goal to try to speak less Lashon Hara, they can fall into the pitfall of Lashon Hara time and time again, where it gets to the point where they just say, I just can't stop myself. So I'd like to explore this from a psychological perspective and look at the idea of self-control. The Torah tells us in this week's parasha that when a person had the sign of saras, they would go to the kohen. And it was only when the kohen would look at the person's body and they would confirm that the mark on the person's body was saras, then they would have the status as a metzora, someone with saras. So we see that there is a connection between saras, Lashon Hara, and the kohen, and the kahuna. And it's interesting that the seminal figure who discusses Lashon Hara and Shmiras HaLashon is the Chofetz Chaim. So I'd like to explore what the Chofetz Chaim says about this idea of the kahuna and Lashon Hara. Because the Chofetz Chaim says that the big day kahuna, the clothes of the Kohen Gadol, would atone for certain sins. The Gemara in Erechim details all the different garments, and the Gemara says that the me'il would atone for Lashon Hara. So the Chofetz Chaim explains, based on this Gemara, that the me'il was blue, and the blue would be a reminder of the sky, of Shamayim, and this would be a link to the Kisei HaKavod of a Kadosh Baruch Hu, and therefore a link to a Kadosh Baruch Hu himself. So therefore, when the Kohen Gadol would wear the me'il, the blue coat, it would create a reminder, a link to a Kadosh Baruch Hu. It would remind the Kohen Gadol that when wearing these clothes, they atone for certain sins, and in particular, for the me'il, it's an atonement for Lashon Hara. And furthermore, the Chofetz Chaim explains that on the me'il there was bells and pomegranates. And the bells would make a sound, whereas the pomegranates were silent. So the Chofetz Chaim says that the bells which make a sound it relates to the sound of speech. That a person, when they make sound, it's through talking, it's through the power of speech. And these bells is a message that when we use our speech, we should use it in the correct way. We should use it in a productive way. But if we are not able to use our speech for Torah or for creating positive interpersonal relationships based on connection and love, therefore we should be silent. We should be silent like the pomegranates. So we see this interplay, this connection between the bells and the pomegranates, which gives a message that we have two options in speech, either to use our speech in a productive way, in the correct way, or to be silent. So the me'il, based on this explanation of the Chofetz Chaim, has the color blue and has these pomegranates and the bells, and these all serve as external reminders to send a message of protecting our speech and using our speech in the right way. These are external reminders to avoid Lashon Hara. So from a psychological perspective, there are many different techniques of how to encourage self-control, how to improve self-control. And one of these ways is this explanation of the Chofetz Chaim. It's through external reminders. Because there are certain triggers that might encourage a person or cause a person to fall into the pitfall of Lashon Hara. It might be the environment that they're in, the people that they interact with, or certain topics of conversation. And the way to avoid the situation escalating into Lashon Hara is to set personal external reminders. Just like the me'il had different external reminders, we need to set our own personal reminders, something which can serve as a way of guiding us and encouraging us to speak in the right way and to avoid speaking Lashon Hara. And if we do this, we can increase our willpower. The research in self-control identifies willpower as an important ingredient to ensuring that we succeed, that we achieve our goals, the goals that we set for ourselves. So if we have a goal to limit or reduce our Lashon Hara, we need to improve our willpower, and this is achieved through the external reminders that we can set ourselves. And through this, a person won't have to say, I just can't stop myself, and it can encourage positive interpersonal relationships with our friends and with our family. Have a great Shabbos, and keep well.